Hello, ODTN. Welcome back. This is Module 3, Eradication, and I'm your host, Newman. I kind of think of myself as Ali 2.0, but hopefully I will do him justice. That said, a lot has happened since everyone was on break. I can tell you this, that the teams are working very, very hard to try to regain control of the environment. So for those of you who are just joined us, I'm going to give you a quick summary of everything that's happened so far. So in Module 1, there was obviously a lot of confusion as to what's going on within the environment. We originally thought that there was an SD technology issue, an operational issue, and that the teams were trying to get to the bottom of that. There was a lot of concerns, obviously raised at the C-suite and the board level. A lot of those concerns were being communicated and discussed, but nothing went out to the public. In Module 2, we did confirm that the SD technology concerns weren't actually 100% correct. In fact, there was a threat actor within the environment and had put malicious firmware onto our devices, thus bringing down most of the network. What is the main consideration at that point was to notify insurance and the CRTC. So that's what we know right now. And I can tell you that at this moment, Alex and Shrey's team are working around the clock, burning long hours to make sure that they understand what's going on and try to get operational aspects back. So Ali, I know the media has been hammering us on this. Is there something that you can bring to us at this point?
Absolutely. I'm just putting it all together, and before I bring the latest update from the media to us, I will re-emphasize this for everyone, especially those that are watching online and that are here in person. There's a lot that is coming out from the media that we actually do not know what the sources are of all of this. While we have put out a statement, nobody from our team has had any direct interviews or conversations with them, or at least none that I know of at this point. So with that preamble and with your permission, Newman, I'll go ahead and have the next media release up on your screen very shortly.
This is Roshan Khan from siberX News. ODTN Telecom is reportedly isolating network segments in an effort to regain control of the ongoing service disruption. While no official statement has been issued, industry experts note that actions like resetting credentials, blocking suspicious connections, and segmenting affected areas suggest a serious containment effort. However, without confirmation on the depth of the situation, uncertainty remains. Will ODTN Telecom restore stability, or is this a disruption far from over? Experts warn that the next few hours will be critical in determining what happens next. Stay informed, stay alert. siberX News will bring you the latest.
Excellent. Okay, so now that we've got that media update, I'm going to pass the mic first to Vivek as the board's liaison, and then I'll pass the mic over to TJ for some of his comments with regards to prioritizing some of the eradication work that needs to be done. But the first concern, I think, is our legal obligations. And Vivek, with your extensive knowledge in this area, what are the main concerns that the board is trying to understand at this point and what we have to do?
Thank you, Newman. The board is concerned that we're meeting all of our compliance and regulatory obligations. The timing of notifying our cyber insurance provider is critical to ensuring that we have coverage both for our operational and post-incident recovery costs. So given that we already have notified CRTC, law enforcement, next step will be now notifying OPC, PIPIDA obligations around privacy. Even though we don't have a data breach at this point, they still want to be notified of cyber incidents, so it's a heads up, but no evidence of data compromise at this stage. And aside from Yeah, so we've got all of those boxes ticked. Now, within the telecom sector, CRTC does play one of the regulatory roles, and already we've been talking with CCCS, which works with a committee called CSTAC, where all the telcos share information. So that will all be in play.
So over to you, TJ. Now that you understand where the board is concerned with, so we really need to look at prioritizing. And of course, from the business aspects of things, I feel like folks here need to know what the business needs to do.
All right, yeah, thanks, Newman. At this point, we are in the heart of a Chief Information Security Officer for ODTN Telecoms. It is very, very important for us to prioritize our activity. So what we are going to be doing now is to establish two war room, command and control center, because based on the information we have in the media right now, it is obvious that some information is getting out there. There is probably a mole within the organization because we have not released this information. It looks like the media is one step ahead of us. So we are going to be establishing two rooms. There is going to be the technical room where Newman, you will be standing as the incident commander. There's going to be a bridge between you and I, and the other room is going to be the C-level executive where I will be feeding them with information coming from your hand, and I'll also be setting up an operations team that will help provide all the logistics that we need to move to the next level. So right now, we need to understand the direction we are going, and I will be using the plan that we've got and the direction from the executive to say we need to prioritize, critical sector. Since we already know there is a presence of a threat actor in our environment, we need to, contain and eradicate appropriately, sweeping through all our assets, including people, including applications, systems, making sure that whatsoever the entry point of the attack is, and we identify them, and we need to leverage the partnership and allies that we have established before now. Seek the support of seek the support of CCCS, our incident response partner, our forensics, so that we get to the root of this and nail it at once. Then begin to run through our playbook from, setting up a green network, migrating services, making sure that we are starting from the core operation and begin to move outward. So I want to assure the C-level executive that my team have been preparing for this. Our business continuity team have been preparing for this. We have plan. It is now for us to action our plan. Thank you.
That's great. So, Chris, now that you've heard what TJ has to say and his plan of action, based on your industry knowledge, do you think those are appropriate actions, or would you have other recommendations?
I think those are the start of some important actions. Before we start going down, separating the work streams, absolutely. Technical counsel, C-level boardroom counsel, right? Getting the right people in the room, maintaining communications, proper communications, to essentially try to ensure that there are no data leaks getting out, at least from the trusted inner circle, and only bringing those people in that have an absolute need to know of this incident. As far as the technical work streams go, before setting up any sort of green networks, we have to know what it is we're dealing with. We have to know what is really the scope of the incident, indicators of compromise, because the last thing any of us want is to start building out our green network with the critical systems that we're going to essentially expect to be safe and secure, only to not have done our root cause investigation to really know the seriousness of the impact that we're dealing with. There is currently a threat actor. This is a human being of some kind, very talented, that is rooting around in our networks. We need to understand everything that we can so that we can take the proper next steps. Communication being one of them.
And I think to add to what Chris said, the executives are going to care about the force multiplier. They care about how quickly we can action on this. And when we talk about small teams, looking for that good information, sharing those IOCs not only with the agencies that we mentioned, but with those trusted vendors that have experience, that have potentially seen similar incidents that can get you to steps 2 and 3, understanding who may be behind it, giving that relevant information to act faster and to leverage some of that vendor network that understands the architecture is going to be one of those questions to get ahead of from the executives that care about how quickly can we get back to an operational standpoint.
Great point. And I think this really segues nicely over to Peru over there. Understanding that our industry partners have said that intelligence is very key and crucial in this particular case. And let's be honest, we don't want to revisit this problem 3-4 days down the road again and have to basically do another whack-a-mole session where we have to go and clean up the entire network. So do we have all the PIRs, do we have identified all the PIRs that we need in order to action and get this threat actor out of our environment?
Yeah, thanks, Newman. I wanted to report a finding that my team and the SOC team together identified, where we were expecting that the threat intel platform would be configured and working in nice orchestration with the SOC platform to avoid this reactive response that we are going through right now. Instead, we would have been doing more proactive. We would be taking more proactive approach to be able to identify much more before it would become such an urgency. So I want to confirm that we have fixed that configuration matter to make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future. And as far as the PIR goes, I think yes, to some extent they also have been resolved. I also wanted to call out that it may also be great to consider for our technical lead, Alex over there, once we are at a state where we can say with 90% confidence that we have successfully eradicated the threat, we do an active threat hunting or even maybe a red teaming exercise just to make sure we get that 90% confidence to 100% confidence.
Newman, if I can just chime in very, very quickly. Again, to those who are watching online, you can keep your questions coming in. I'll feed them in. But Newman, one of the things that has come in right now is as we're diving deeper, and Shrey and team have already texted us that they're prepared to show us more details about what they know. It's a question of who do we trust within our wider security and network teams? Because to extend from what TJ had said, and I'll read the question verbatim, is how, and I'll bring it up right now, is how do we know that the people that we assign to do certain activities are actually not the individuals involved in what is presumably even a nation state?
That's an extremely good question, and one that I think we would have to come together as a team and a group to understand who do we trust and whether or not we need to act on changing some of the policies with regards to how we work. So one of the areas that you could probably potentially look at is having 2 staff members work on the same problem so that there's 2 people that are turning the keys for this. But that's just some of my experiences. What I would like to pass the mic over is Hardeep. Since he's the main director of cyber threat response, how do we deal with the insider threat issue?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know sometimes it's obviously the best case scenario is obviously, as you said, is like have multiple people working together, but there's always a resource challenge, and this is where I think bringing in external help to kind of review and validate some of the findings, I think that would be really helpful. The other pieces are, really focusing on kind of what are the key facts that we have, right? And ensuring that our external consultants are going through each one of those pieces and validating. I would say that would probably be the key aspects.
So I'm going to quickly ask Richard, since you're the cyber risk consultant here, obviously coming in as a third party from outside, giving us some advice as a consultant, one of the main challenges is sharing of information, as Peru had mentioned earlier. So how do we know that our trusted partners are not going to be feeding that information back to the threat actors?
That's not my concern. And I'll tell you why it's not my concern. So hold on a second. I've been told to kick it up a notch, so I'm going to kick it up a notch. So what the hell are we doing, right? We're not doing this properly. Our priority should be restoration of services to the people who depend on us to provide them these services. I'm hearing phone calls now of nurses and doctors in hospitals that rely on our telecom services who are no longer able to treat patients. Fridges that contain blood are prox card controlled, and those things are down. Someone had to go get an axe to get into that fridge and give blood to someone who was minutes from dying. We need to stop worrying about eradication. That can't be the priority. These people are paying us for a service. They are relying on these services. And yes, it's important to expunge the threat actor, but we have an obligation, a social obligation to these people to get our act together.
Richard, I appreciate that the Red Bull has kicked in, but I'm just going to be very, very honest at this point that that's fine. But Newman, again, I'm sorry, but I've been dealing with this for a while now, and I'm not in favor of just focusing on recovery when we get to a point where we recover and the same attack permeates again and we go down twice as hard. So honestly, Newman, at this point, and me and Alex have not been speaking for a while based on the matrix that you set up, but I really want to know, well, what do they know at this point and what can they tell us?
So this is a good segue over to Alex's team at this point. We really need to understand what has happened. So if you've got any idea or any information or any evidence that you can present to us to help us understand what's happened and how can we get rid of this problem.
All right, well, we've been sifting, and unfortunately we had a bit of a delay because of a shift change. The collective agreement does not allow for the team to go beyond 12 hours. So we got to deal with the constraints we have. But what we have determined is that the firmware that is installed on most of our systems is not from the vendor. Certainly it is based off of vendor code, but I'm getting much more suspicious that their compromise a few months ago has resulted in a rogue version that has been put into our environment. And if we go to their website, they have version 3 of Internet OS, whereas we have version 13 of Internet OS. So there's some major problems here. We're working with the NOC to provide recommendations on what they should be doing from a containment perspective.
So from the technical aspects, what's the recommendation here to resolve this problem?
I understand where Richard's coming from, but the whack-a-mole game, we don't like playing it, and that's what we do every day, 24/7 actually. So I do think that we need to have a clean environment to provide those services to our users, particularly the ones that have very strict SLAs. It's above my pay grade, but I do know that there's fines accumulating against ODTN Telecom because we are not getting our environment back online. So I think it is a rebuild, and that's what I recommend to the NOC to do.
Okay, so let's go to somebody that does have the authority to make some actions happen. Hardeep, your team is the one that's going in there, looking at the response and the remediation aspects. What plans do you have? What can we report to the board that we're doing our due diligence, that our partners and our paid customers are going to get their services back?
Yeah, so I do agree with Alex's kind of recommendation. I think the first step is we really need to stop the bleeding and really give the team, some time to really understand, what has happened and how this has happened. And part of that is really, locking down the network and segmenting the network, right? And conducting a little bit of that root cause analysis, right? I know that's probably not the answer that the board probably wants to hear, but we definitely need to understand what has happened before we can then kind of start restoring services. Once we've kind of got a better understanding on that, then we can then start working on a plan of how we can create a green network to then restore services.
So I'm telling you right now, the C-suite wants a solid plan coming from you. But that said, I'm going to pass the mic over to Octavia because during blue sky times, you've got plenty of plans from a technology perspective to maybe make some changes to the network, to upgrade our systems, to serve our customers better. Can some of those plans be brought into play very quickly?
Absolutely, they can. One of the things that we have to think about is, to many of my colleagues' point, we don't know who to trust. And so I'm going to actually ask our board if it's okay if we can actually go ahead and use some of the monies that was actually utilized and is available for us to actually go with a third party to actually help us rebuild right now, while we actually give my team the resources so that they can actually continue to do the investigation on what's currently happening in the current environment. We will start rebuilding a new environment and actually go and allow that. That will actually allow us to ensure that we can get rid of some of the tech debt that we had previously, and also it'll allow us to actually identify the resource gaps that we have, and we have to have some really hard conversations going forward is to, do we have the right resources to move this immediately? I would like to ask our board advisor if it's okay if he can go to the board so that we can actually get those resources and that money allocated right now so that we can start the rebuild.
Excellent plan. Never waste a good crisis. So one of the main things that I think we need to focus on is really looking at the priorities. And I can tell you right now, our CEO is absolutely pissed. He's on a plane back into the country. And Ali, can you tell us what our CEO is thinking?
Yeah, I'll bring it up very shortly. I've actually got a couple of forwarded emails from the CEO, how his email or their email has gotten out into the public. Again, I will not know and I will not understand. But Shrey, I will tell you, and as I know you're preparing an environment to walk us through, a question has come in, and I'll leave that to you and Alex just to enjoy and noodle on while I bring up this email. I'll read it verbatim. It says, containment could take several days or weeks. And we just finished containment, apparently. Are you talking about restoring before containment and eradication? Where is your thinking headed towards? I'll leave you with that point while I bring up this email that's been forwarded to me by the CEO. And it's starting to get pretty interesting. It'll come up on the screen very, very shortly. So the CEO has forwarded something that has now also gone to customer service. I'll read it out verbatim. Customers are angry. Things like, dear people I pay, I am appalled by the recent service of something I spend my hard-earned money on. This is not the level of service I expect from a company of your stature. It's been frustrating to deal with this issue, and I've had no clear explanation. I demand to know what has happened and how it's being handled, as well as what steps you're taking to prevent this from happening again. I need a prompt response with concrete information about how you're addressing the situation. I'm expecting a prompt response. Said that 3 times. We have multiple emails like this that are coming our way, not just from the public, but some from pretty high-profile entities as well. At this point, Newman, I don't know what else to make out of this, besides either someone here drafts up how we're responding to each of these important requests, and the technical team gives us more depth into what's going on, because this is starting to spread quite a bit.
And I agree with you. And I think we need to really look at what the plan from the technical team is. So Shrey, do you have something for us that we can look at and kind of see where we can go from there?
Absolutely, Newman. I have the reports from my engineers who are working on this very hard, and we have been working with the SOC team hand in hand. There are 5 steps which we're going to take. I'm going to list them all. There's the report which I had just received from them. The first step, we are disabling all the remote access to the affected systems. We want to make sure that any remote access to the affected area or the segmentations of them are completely revoked. We are killing all the active sessions. That is one of the suggestions that I just received from Alex and the SOC team. So I just want to make sure that that's been incorporated. Third one, the VLAN isolation for the live compromised nodes. We are applying ACLs to limit the lateral movement. This is to stop the spread, make sure that the eradication is properly in phase as well, and ensure that the lateral movement is completely stopped. Number 4, any node which we flag as compromised, which has been logically segmented, and this is to ensure that the SLAs with very high priority services like the medical services.
I'm going to jump in there, Shrey. And Newman, look, there's just a lot of things that's being thrown our way. Alex, I've said this before, and I'm going to bring it to you as well. Can you tell me what's the top priority from that list? And I really want to hear from the table, based on what you're recommending, which one should we deal with first? Because you're telling me we're down on resources. We probably need to make an ask for more money. You're listing me a lot of things. I don't have a timeline, and I don't have approval from anyone here.
From the SOC, our core infrastructure is not ours right now. and in order for us to get back to a service level that we can start reintroducing the services to our customers, it's a rebuild. So I do believe that we need to start getting quite aggressive with jumping on the boxes and flashing it with the firmware. It isn't exactly the process that we defined in our IRP, but at this point, the news reports and the emails that our SOC team is now seeing from the CEO is not helping.
Alex, I need very specific costing, I need very specific timelines, and I need very specific resources that you're going to be allocating to this. And I have to report back to, the CEO, who's obviously very, very pissed off at this moment, when we're going to bring these things back online. I mean, what you're suggesting is good, but if it's going to take 1,000 hours to get done, that's a whole month. Like, we don't have that luxury of time. We need a minimum viable product, and we need to serve our very critical customers right now, and we got to prioritize that right away. So whatever resources you need, you got to come up with a good plan and present that to us right now so that we can give you the resources, the funding to get it done.
So can I jump in?
Yep.
I've already said that we are not going to have Alex's team to do the rebuild. And so we need to go ahead and pass it over to our board advisor. I need the money from the board. I've already given them the plan. I've already asked them for what we need. We are not going to have our internal team rebuild because we already have a resource constraint.
Yep.
And so I would like for, if we can actually start to have the conversation with our board so that we can actually release the funding. It is going to be a significant amount, but to your point, we don't want to let this go to waste. We do know we have a significant issue, and so we need to rebuild.
This is perfect example of how things go during an incident. There's going to be competing proposals, and here's actually where we need to make a decision at the C-suite level. So show of hands, we have two proposals right now. Fix our current mess, or we take use of this crisis and look at doing a whole new rebuild, spend the money, do it right. I'm not trying to sell that particular one, but I'm just saying that we've got two options. So here's where we need to make some decisions. TJ, as a CISO, tell us.
Yeah, Newman, as my incident commander, I know I can perceive a lot of pressure on your team. They need to focus their attention in making sure that we identify the root cause, work with the forensic investigators and ensure we identify the root cause and begin to build things on there. You need to coordinate that piece. Do not allow them to be distracted. Make sure that they focus on the job. Whoever that needs to communicate with the technical team, they should conduit that through you and make sure that you are now on sync to make the best decision for the organization. As to how we are going to move forward from here, I want to say that we need to start rebuilding now. So we need to support our Chief Technology Officer to begin to rebuild in the new isolated network where we restore services back to normal. And we need to begin to work with our legal team to understand our contractual obligation to all these critical sectors that are providing essential services to our citizens so that we are not in mess after the whole thing is resolved. So we want to follow our SLA and make sure that those services are restored first, especially as we are around them, in the critical sector. We want to make sure that the health people are restored, their services are restored. We want to make sure that pharmaceutical, we want to make sure that transportation and the likes are restored based on the SLA that we have known. So please make sure you take that into consideration and reduce the pressure that is going into the technical team so that they can focus on the job that they need to do. Thank you.
Newman? Newman?
That's actually very good. So effectively, there will be a retask of some of the internal teams to focus on the investigation and get to the bottom of it. It looks like there's going to be a split, having some of the external parties come in to build the new environment under the direction of the CTO. And I think, Andrew, here, you've got some industry advice for us?
To make the point, the way to think about this is that the cost and timeline of eradication completely unknown. A threat actor going from silent and undiscovered to under active threat acts very differently. And when we look at the rebuild process, known timeline, known cost, that's what enables that C-suite to make that choice, rather than the timelines that keep pushing as you attempt to eradicate and attempt to eradicate. That's unknown versus the rebuild is an absolute known cost.
I would also like to jump in here. Let's get HR and legal on, because our collective agreement is not going to allow some third party to start jumping on to our core network and starting to administer it.
Understood. Richard.
To Octavia's point, TJ's point, and to your earlier question, we have to engage an external third party to move forward with this. We can't trust a single person inside the environment right now. We have not been able to determine where the leak is. We're not able to determine who the mole is. For all I know, Alex is the mole.
I kind of think Alex is the mole
Alex,
as well.
Alex, you're fired.
So we can't trust a single person in the environment until we really know what's going on, and we need to engage with an external party now. Vivek, I recommend that you get that money right now to engage with a third party to start rebuilding at least a minimum viable product to get some semblance of operational capacity back.
Yeah. No, I've taken these updates and briefed the board. So the recommendations from the CTO and the CISO are fully supported to proceed with the rebuild, proceed with the third party. It's not just a question of trusting Alex and team or not. We know they're working hard. They're trying their best. It's really, we've exhausted their capacity and their skill. So this is really a question of we need to have a tempo faster, but the board has 5 asks. Okay, 1, we want a tested and proven eradication plan on the firmware. In your clean room, test it, prove it. 2, we want to understand who did it and what their motive was. So attribution is an essential part of that eradication phase. 3, we want to see monitoring in place to detect any further regression on any of the rebuilt systems. We want new SOAR cases put in place so that we could have accelerated alerts with context on any firmware action or access. 4, we want all access zeroed out. So zero-based budgeting for access, remove all access and add back what's essentially needed. And we'd like to have these hourly updates.
Newman, I'm sorry to, I guess, to rain in on your party here, but I've just got a text, as you know, we're on another network from the CEO, and I'll read it out verbatim to you, and I don't know who wants to deal with this, but CEO said, I have the Premier calling me. I need a status update and an estimate on when services will be restored. Is there anything or any support you need? If you're looking for rupees and cents, this is probably the time.
Excellent. So I think that's really where we want to go with this, is to get all that support. Now that the board has given us the directions, we should be moving towards that, getting those plans in place. So Hardeep, I think at this point, your team will be very much in charge of managing all that funding to look at the remediation components of this, following the CTO's plans. For attribution, so Peru, we need to look at how you can get an answer from just our trusted partners to understand what the attribution looks like for this. I know it's hard, but we have to try to answer some of those questions. And Alex and team, just keep continuing to work. We still need to try to get to the bottom of this. So any evidence, any pieces of information you can find, that's really where we're going to have to use your team's expertise at this point.
We are looking for some direction on prioritization, because we've heard help contain, help determine attribution, trying to chase ghosts in the wire. So we do need some direction on where we should be focusing, because we are still spread too thin.
No, understood. And this goes back to you, TJ. As a CISO, you got to put those priorities in place. So what would you tell Alex at this point from a priority perspective, given the fact that we've now approved Octavia's plan to move ahead? Their team needs priorities.
Yeah, that's good. Alex, we are going to be working with HR. We understand your concern. We want to make sure that you guys are not overly stressed. You know, it is a stressful time. we must all accept to that fact that we need additional resources. So we are going to be engaging our partner. We already have memorandum of understanding to get them engaged. We also have a memorandum of understanding with our competitor, so to say. At this time, we are no longer competitor. We are now collaborating together to restore these services. So they will be releasing some of their technical folks for us so that they can support you and your team to get to the bottom of this, and also our forensic investigators from our incident response retainer, they will also be supporting you. So you make sure that you work with those teams to get to the root of that. I will be working with the CTO to engage the system and technical team to rebuild system from scratch to be put in the new network so that we can begin to plan on how we restore services as soon as possible. I hope that is clear.
It is. Can we get some pizza ordered as well?
Yes, for sure.
Thanks, CISO.
We're already sending it over. Don't worry about it. And we're going to actually get you all some sleep pods as well.
That would be appreciated.
One quick thing here is this. In order to facilitate and help Octavia's team, Trevor and Michael, you'll be tasked to basically work on the new project in this particular case. But how quickly can we bring existing resources already in our inventory to bear? Do we have something that's already, like I said, in our wheelhouse today?
So while we were doing, looking up at the eradication and doing that stuff, we had our team looking at the inventory of what we have in stock, and we do have some core infrastructure that was going to be replaced in 2 months that we may be able to put in advance to replace the core infrastructure.
So based on that assessment, do we have, can we expedite some of those timelines that we can report back to the board saying that we can, instead of taking 2 weeks, we can shrink this down to a week because we already have inventory in stock?
So the inventory is obviously still in boxes. We have to really rip it apart and make sure everything's there. But yeah, we can get some real tight timelines to get it to the board.
Michael, from a design perspective and timeline perspective, do we have some set or estimate timelines?
It's going to depend on how far apart the sites are, how many boxes we have to drive to how many locations, how many accidents there are on the bridge today. We're going to be looking at all of these things, and it's going to be really hard to get the precision that I think the board is looking for. But I think that overall,
I think the board just needs an estimate at this point.
An estimate, yeah. I think that we can give them a ballpark estimate.
Okay, good.
And Newman, I have to chime in because we've had a couple of folks respond to the poll, and more polls have been opened up as well. Please feel free to respond. 2 comments have now come in, and I second this, is we've used the word recovery at least 3 to 4 times, which is fine. But we're talking about eradicating and removing this threat. And in very simple terms, what we're hearing right now, and what the audience is also telling me, is what we're hearing is rebuild it and automatically the threat goes away. And I don't think that's the direction we want to be going down. Now, Shrey and Alex, I've been sparing you some of the conversation, but yeah, you're asking for prioritization, and you've pushed the conversation towards a rebuild. You've asked for more pizza and everything else, which we'll figure out. But it doesn't tell me how are we eradicating this threat. Can we come back to that topic?
From our incident response plan perspective, I think we've been a bit asymmetric on following that plan. Our team has been focusing on detection. We've been trying to make recommendations on containment, and we're already now talking about recovery. I think we do need to understand what needs to actually happen. I do believe it is a rebuild. It's probably the fastest way to get our core network up, and that will then allow us to jump to the edges and start updating there and bringing services back online. But like I said, eradication and recovery are 2 discrete stages that we need to focus on building it out, make sure it's stable before we start bringing services back online. I would hate to have people expect the service is now working and then it fails again.
So one of the things that I just want to make sure, Alex and Shrey, we actually pay attention to, the reason that we're doing a rebuild is not so you don't actually find out what's going on. The rebuild has nothing to do with you. We are taking that offline. We need you to focus on really containing the situation and actually identifying the threat actor and eradicating them. And so if you're looking for that priority, that's kind of what we need. My job as a CTO is to make sure things are up and running, right? And so I'm going to be focused on making sure it's up and running. I think I want to follow today's direction, work on actually finding out what's going on. You guys are going to work on 2 separate tasks. So we're going to focus on the rebuild. We're going to work with Michael to actually get the architecture together, what we actually need to do and how we need to rebuild that. And then you all work. I'm going to hand over my role over to TJ, really work on looking at that, and I'm hoping that we can have some of our SOC resources help you as well.
No, this is perfect. So I have to understand that these are parallel things that are moving all at the same time. So yes, there are 2 competing priorities. Luckily for us, we have separate resources working on one. Our internal should really be focused on understanding what happened. Once we have a good picture of what's happening, what IOCs that we're able to collect from this, we can then go back into our system to try to clean it up. Now, that does not mean that we're going to trust the current situation. We're going to call that a red zone. We're not going to trust it until we are absolutely certain that it can be brought into a green zone. So that is what you should be focusing on at this point. I know it's going to be tough and it's going to be long hours, but that's what we have to support and get moving on.
Yeah, thanks you, Neiman. Just to reiterate what Octava has said there, a lot of the framework that we use today kind of sequentially place the different stages of incident response, but that does not necessarily mean that we should apply them in a waterfall model. At this point, we are running against time. We need to be agile about our approach, and that is why we have said the 2 teams are going to be working in parallel. This newly segmented network where we are going to recover from is isolated from the rest of the network. It's not going to be exposed, so you need to focus on identifying the root cause. You maximize all the resources that have been provided to you from CCs, CCCS, incident response partner, our forensic investigator to know the entry point. So that is your job. You focus on that and allow the technology team to focus on rebuilding. We are working against time. We want to make sure that by the time you have identified the root cause, it is not that time you are now looking for systems. It is not that time you are architecting. It is not that time we are starting from scratch. So we are going in parallel. We have to be agile about it and get things back up as quickly as possible. Thank you.
And to Richard's point, if we don't trust internal staff to rebuild that area, do we trust internal staff to be the ones that find the root cause? Have we discussed bringing in a third-party incident response firm?
We sure can't. I would recommend that Alex and Shrey's teams are not allowed to work individually or solo. There still runs a risk of more than one internal threat actor inside the environment, but the chances of those 2 working together on the same problem are slim. You must have that someone looking over someone's shoulder while they work on this to ensure the actor is correctly expunged.
So we really need to have that 2-person turning the key aspect of process, and that's very important to the individual that is on the ground facilitating that work. So Hardeep, your team has really got to be on the ball for that one. We still don't know who to trust at this point, and we really need to weed out that person.
I'm just going to put a yeah but there, because this is an environment that the NOC and SOC have been managing and owning for years. And now you're expecting a third party to come in. They don't understand it. They don't know how we configure things. They're going to need us.
Quick question. Can I just chime in, because I've got one that's come in. Rob, maybe do you know this third party that comes in, would they potentially be covered under insurance?
In advance, all of those insurance requirements would have to have been agreed to.
Okay.
So we would review the contract to make sure that was the case. Otherwise, they'll be ineligible.
And Newman, if I can, and I know Shrey has just messaged me saying he can show us some of the logs. There's also a concern that these logs have been tampered with. Shrey, are you prepared to show us what you're seeing from a logging perspective and bring up your environment so that we can actually determine how you're doing some of your analysis at this point?
Absolutely, we can do it. However, here's one important note which one of the engineers did share with me earlier. They did notice some sort of corruption within the environment. They saw some of the logs being tampered with. They saw some updates which are not supposed to be over there. However, I can definitely show you how these logs are looking like right now. Just one second, let me pull up the environment for you guys.
So while he's doing that, Newman, I'll turn it back to you, but there's a lot of concern about this. Go ahead, Shrey.
No, understood. And Alex, just to your point, previous point, the if we are going to be bringing a third party in there, we'll obviously be working with the union reps to make sure that the incident folks and the investigators that are coming in, they would have authority, and that your team would have to work with them, and you have to work under those folks.
As long as they know what they're doing.
Fair enough. Shrey, do you have something to share?
Absolutely. So as you can see right now on the screen, these sort of activity logs are the ones which we are primarily focused upon. There are certain exports, there are certain imports, there are certain firmware updates that we as well can see at the same time. However, some seem to be normal, they are authorized, but some are just randomly showing up at the moment. We don't see the timestamps, they are not matching up right now. That is clearly an indicator of log tampering. Not sure how trustable these logs are anymore within our system. Definitely the engineers are working on to reboot the systems, reset the logs, reconfigure these things, probably re-image the devices as well if required. But I'm not sure if I would be trusting these logs at the moment.
Okay, understood. Sounds like there's a lot of unknowns still at this point. Now, one big thing that we still do not understand about this whole attack is, what is the motive behind this? Why would someone want to do this? Now, back to our threat intel folks, do we have any idea who this particular actor may be and what are their motives?
We may have that information, but I'm afraid I can't talk about that in this setting due to confidentiality issues. So we can take that offline.
I'd like to press on that a bit. Again, I did not mean to be this way, but taking it offline at this point or taking it off the record, that does not help the situation we're in. Because I'm still getting texts about we need answers. There's a premiers that's involved. You know the drill. So at least point us in some direction.
There is an indication that there is definitely somebody from the organization who may be causing harm to the organization.
All right, at this point, we seem to have established the fact that we have a mole, so we need to involve the peoples and culture, our HR, so that, and the legal team to understand what the next plan of action is and engage our forensic investigation to preserve any evidences that may help to prosecute whoever that is identified to be involved in this one at this point. And I know, Ali, you want to understand who the threat actors are, but you need to please allow us to do our job. We have processes that we need to follow. There are reasons why we are keeping this information private, and please just respect that fact. You need to trust us, and that is why we are being paid heavily to do our job. So thank you for that.
So I have a question for Pearl, without giving away information. Is the insiders, do they still have active access to the system? And have we seen where they have done anything within the system recently?
I would say that's a question to Alex and team. However, what I can say is what Shrey was pointing towards in terms of tampered logs. I'm also seeing that similar pattern through the exercise around threat hunting that my team recently executed on. So Alex or team, would you have some more information in that?
We'll need some information about the user so we can start making a fingerprint of their behavior over the last few weeks. I do want to address the timestamp issue. We did have an NTP server that went down and we didn't bring it back up. So I think there might be a little bit of time dilation within our SIM that could be impacting some of our investigation as well.
So I would say typically in a threat intelligence, you would actually have have identified the user themselves. So I will ask a very direct question.
Not when the logs are tampered.
Do you have evidence of the logs, of the IP address in which the logs are being tampered from?
Nope.
Okay.
I
can add something here. On top of it, I'm also looking at some scans which we just made. If I can have the results on top of the screen. The problem is there are certain SSH keys which were weak and they were detected throughout the environment network. So the logs which were being tampered, it would have been quite easy to do so. That's one of the patterns which I just noticed right now. As you can see, the scan might be, okay, there we go. The weak SSH keys, which is a vulnerability based upon the changed firmware that we noticed right now. That's one of the biggest pattern or the vector that I'm noticing at the moment.
So to minimize damage to our environment, Hardeep, you'll need to work with the HR teams to isolate this particular suspect, make sure that they are not going to catch on or be aware of the current situation that they're in, make sure that they're given tasks to feel like they're still continuing the work that they're doing, but make sure that they don't have access to the rest of the environment. So give them something that they're doing that is away from our environment. Don't tip them off until we have enough evidence to make a seizure or an arrest of them.
So I just want to say, with that, it seems as if we don't know who the individual was and we don't have the access to identify who they are. What I would ask my team to do is to look at the SSH keys and look at the .ssh file itself and see what other servers those keys live on and who has access to those servers.
Well, there's value. So we're still doing some of that investigation, but there's value in removing the threat from the environment for now, assuming they are in fact the threat. And if they are the threat, then their activities would cease. So there is some usefulness around that. So I think we still should continue with that. Again, multiple parallel actions as we go along.
You wanted to add something? Because I do have a question on these. You're referencing weak SSH keys. Was the protocol around the key management changed at all in the recent past?
Based upon the firmware updates, yes, it seems to be changed, but it was not authorized. It was not in the regular schedule that we were supposed to do it, but we are still looking at this one of the logs. Now, either this log is, it can be something which is not actually true, and the perpetrators may have just entered this log within the system that we are looking at the moment. We're still validating the input for this one, and technically what we've done is we have implemented a logical segmentation for these networks that enables us to isolate the entire network and scan it thoroughly. In case if perpetrators want to rebuild or regain the access, they won't be able to do so.
Yeah, I would like to ask the technical team technical questions here. And this might go to Alex. Based on our login architecture, I want to believe what we are currently seeing on the screen is a local log on the devices. Are we shipping our log externally to a different system, maybe to a data lake where we have restricted access, to those logs?
If you recall, last year we wanted to reduce costs, so we reduced our retention capabilities within the SIM, and that meant reducing what we are collecting. So we do collect the primary SecOps tooling, but network and core is now a network ops responsibility.
Wow.
Okay, Alex, that's just a bombshell you dropped on us. It's going to make, obviously, the investigation part of this very difficult for us, but we would have to continue even though we don't have the full visibility and the full logging components. So we're going to have to look at other pieces of evidence. Now, the other part for eradication is this. We've got weak SSH keys. How quickly can we re-roll those throughout the environment? What is the effort? What's the timeline? And of course, how can we restrict that as well to only critical staff members that need access to it? I only want 1 or 2 individuals with access at this point.
Typically, re-imaging and reinstating the access, and it was pointed out earlier that the revoke and reinstate access as required by the advisory is quite efficient over here, and it's going to take us a couple of hours to do it throughout the network. Of course, we're going to start with the high priority crown jewels on top, and we're going to laterally move downwards, overall securing the entire network and reinstating all the SSH keys. Of course, the priority is going to be with the core network and the distribution layers. However, we are still focusing upon the primary images within the core MPLS switches, and based on that, we're going to move forward.
Okay, so that will be an item that's of priority, and I think TJ, you'll support us on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get going.
Team, from a Sophos perspective, these devices and the way our SSH keys have been provisioned, you just heard Shrey say something to the effect of, this wasn't authorized. Well, it wasn't authorized, but it was still done. Fair to say that, again, sleeping at the wheel, we didn't catch some of these changes?
Yes.
Fair enough. And I'm going to be very direct and ask this. I mean, we're hearing these conversations about, all right, we've had budget cuts, etc. This is something we should have caught on. And I'm really trying to gear this towards, because we've gone deeper into the technical, but we have some folks here from the executive standpoint may not know what we're talking about from the SSH standpoint. Is there anything that you can help us understand why this may not have been picked up?
A lot has to do with where you're collecting data from, what data you're actually collecting, and then what you're doing with that collected data. Incident responders typically have questions, just like boardroom members have questions. They want to know things. And so we need to make sure that whenever we're collecting the data, how we do it, whether it's centrally managed and collected into a SIM, or if we have to fetch it, locally, off of remote systems, we have to make sure that the integrity is there, which winds up being key, which is one of the reasons why critical data winds up being sent back into a SIM platform. Focus on identity usually winds up being one of the key areas of incident response and network breaches, like what I think is being experienced here. Because in every breach, every ransomware case, every nation-state threat actor that I've dealt with, compromised credentials in some way, shape, or form have been involved. And if we focus on where accounts are being used and what systems they're using and where that access is, kind of points us in a better direction to get to the answers to the questions that we have.
No, I couldn't agree more. Bad guy always has to have some kind of identity to come back into the network. With that, I think Ali, I think we've got another update from the media at this point. Perhaps we should head over to that.
Yeah, before I do that, I could see Alex and Shrey busy applying on LinkedIn for their next job. Shrey, anything else that you want to share based on me saying you folks are sleeping at the wheel?
Nothing right now as of Hari. I just want to get a status updates upon the parallel chain which is happening right now. That is the reinstating of the network. That will help me set up the operations properly in case if there is any update.
Yeah, well, when the update comes, it comes, but we are running a little bit short on time, and you are right, Newman, that we do have another media update who clearly know a little bit too much about what's going on, and I wonder who at this table is busy on WhatsApp texting them, but, well, the media has something to say, and it's going to come up on the screen right now.
This is Roshan Khan from siberX News. Cybersecurity forums are buzzing with speculation that the ongoing telecom disruption may be more than just an outage. Some experts suggest it could be a state-sponsored cyber attack. Analysts point to highly advanced hacking techniques that mirror nation-state level tactics, raising concerns that this is a deliberate strategic operation rather than a random breach. Authorities have not confirmed these claims, but industry leaders warn that if true, the impact could extend far beyond telecom critical services, like hospitals and infrastructures may also be at risk. As concern grows, the key question remains, is this just the beginning? Stay tuned with siberX for further developments.
Well, is this just the beginning? I think that was a very powerful line from our news media, probably the most important thing that they've shared with us so far. Newman, I want to thank you for leading us through this very critical and technical juncture. Your leadership was much appreciated, and thank you everybody for joining this session. We're going to be taking a short break for the next maybe 20 minutes, and then at 2:45 we'll be going into the next module, which focuses on recovery. That module will be led by Jillian and co-led by myself as well, and we'll begin at 2:45. They say that the best time to relax is when you have no time for it. Well, good luck finding some time right now, and we'll meet in 25 minutes for the next session. Thank you for joining us.